Hey everyone, apologies for the slight delay in publishing. We're about a day behind here. I did have a trip to the doctor yesterday to take care of some medically needed eyelid surgery. It was not something I wanted to do, but something my doctor said I needed to do. So we did that. I'm looking a little beat up today, but since I'm not on video, that's okay. But off we go. This is Tom from Cerulean Bay, and we're going to dive right back into things. So we're working on our third episode about Tiki. I thought maybe we could do this in three. It looks like it might get pushed into a fourth episode just because we have so many cool things to talk about when it comes to Tiki. But we previously did cover what Tiki is and what its history was about and whether or not it's cultural appropriation or if it really is cultural appreciation. There is a big difference between the two. As we mentioned before, it doesn't have to be appropriation. And if you know a bit about where something comes from, what it truly is about culturally, and how to use it properly, then it's okay to use. Hint, hint. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. But today we're getting into some different tiki styles. There is no official or set number of that. And a lot of people, when they think about tiki, they think, well, isn't that kind of just one style? If you have your iconic tiki hut in mind, or maybe something you've seen at a backyard tiki party or something. But no, we've dug into this, and through our history and research, we've actually come up with 7 different styles of tiki. So we're going to cover 3 or 4 of them today, depending on how time allows. And what we're not able to fit into this episode, we'll just put it into another one. So let's dive in and look at the different ones we have here. Remember, the cool thing about Tiki is that you can customize it any way you want. Do it in a way that works for you. As we always say, this is your personal space. You have to create something that truly transports you to your tropical happy place, your Tiki place. So everything is customizable. There are no specific rules you need to follow here. But we're going to be talking about some traditional Polynesian tiki style, which is actually more of the authentic cultural look. Then there's the mid-century American or retro tiki, which is probably the look most people are familiar with, that started back in the 1950s and 60s. Then we'll be getting into jungle rainforests. Then there are the headhunters and cannibals. Believe it or not, that is a whole separate look. Then there's also the nautical look, which then kind of segues into the pirate look, if that's something you might want to do. Within the pirate look, there is a truly authentic look that you can go after, which some people do. And they're able to procure some pretty cool artifacts back from the 17th and 18th centuries in the days of piracy. Or you can go the Disney inspired route, which is also what a lot of people are familiar with. And a lot of those looks are a lot of fun. And then finally, there is the surfer beachcomber look, which is what I kind of equate to a Jimmy Buffett type of look, kind of that Key West surfer inspired theme. So yeah, those are your 7 themes there. And we're just going to go ahead and start off with the first one, which is traditional Polynesian tiki style. And as I mentioned, this theme emphasizes more of an authentic Polynesian artistry and motif, or kind of South Pacific in general. If you've been to the western side of the South Pacific, where Fiji is, New Caledonia, the Solomon Islands, that's more of the Melanesia area. And there are some differences in cultural backgrounds and histories, which we won't get into here. But this theme does look at the cultural aspect and what do you really see if you go down to these islands, and it's bringing some of those art forms home. It focuses on more of an open and airy look compared to what is more widely known in like the real heavily layered, heavily decorated tiki bar look that you would see, in a true tiki bar. So traditional Polynesian, it focuses on natural materials. You're going to have your grass and fiber weavings. You've got a lot of bamboo and rattan accents. But the key thing in there is you've got really awesome artwork. There's nothing kitschy about it. There's nothing touristy about it. You can get away with having just a few really nice pieces of wall art, maybe some tropically inspired art forms that come from centuries back, things that bring in really bold pops of color. Those are actually key because you would want the bulk of your flooring and furnishings and maybe even your wall colors to be more on the neutral side or with a combination of neutrals in there. Having a few heavily textured pieces. So that's where you have your seagrass or woven cane chairs, any furnishings maybe made out of bamboo. Again, largely all in wood tones, neutral colors, and that can also include things like carved wooden masks, replicas of historical tribal artifacts, warrior clubs, tiki carvings that are truly historically inspired. And then you bring in those really bold, wonderful pops of color in your artwork, in your upholstery, in throw pillows, and things like that. So hopefully that kind of gives you a visual about what tropical tiki would look like. And again, it is tiki because it is where the authenticity of it comes from. It is based on a historical look and on historical pieces. So, you don't have to have large quantities of decor. The key here is not to overload a space, it's to keep it open and airy and let your really cool pieces, your individual pieces, or, if you have a really cool piece of furniture maybe that you were able to get, you want those to do the talking. You can really, really create beautiful, authentic scenes when you combine all of these elements together. And you are not at all looking like the iconic tiki bar. There is nothing commercialized or cartoonish about what you've got. So, truly, truly wonderful possibilities there. A note about looking for anything when it comes to carvings, wood carvings. Again, try to keep things as authentic as possible, or at least authentically inspired, because truly authentic pieces can be expensive, especially depending on how old they are. But you do want to keep your wood carvings set up in ways where they can really pop. They can speak for themselves. These are going to be pieces that have a beautiful carving on them or really nice tribal carvings in them, which create these very intricate and complex patterns. And again, more visual texture, which is so important, especially when you're working with a lot of neutrals and you're trying to keep the pops of color separate into the walls and in your furnishings. But when you're thinking of art pieces too, there are some really cool groups on Facebook, as we've mentioned before. There's a lot of great independent artists on Facebook. Really, if you choose the country of your choice and you just start searching the groups in there, there's a lot of amazingly talented people, many of whom are very anxious to get to be known in other countries and will ship to the US. There is one artist that we truly do love. Her name is Kim McDonald. And if you are on Facebook and you go to Kim McDonald Art, she has absolutely beautiful work. We think it is just so wonderfully inspired, great use of color and form. She has really captured the essence of Hawaii and Polynesia, and because she's lived in these places and she's traveled extensively throughout all of them, she really is able to capture the real essence of Polynesia in her work and in her vibrant colors. And when you see it, you'll know what I mean. She's just a really great example of an artist who knows what she's doing. Her work is also a very good example of what not to use in a very busy tiki design decor style, because you wouldn't want her artwork or anyone else's like it to get lost in all of the layers. These are pieces that stand out beautifully on their own. And as we like to say, you should just let them do the talking. One other note about traditional Polynesian design is that regarding lighting, the primary focus there is using a lot of natural light. Whereas in iconic tiki style, which we'll get into here in a minute, that's where you're going to see a lot of the brightly colored lights and subtle colored lights and just all shades of everything. In traditional Polynesian, you're looking at a lot of natural light. And then as the day comes to a close, nighttime sets in. This is where you can really have a cool table lamp or a really cool light fixture of some sort, again, just with normal warm lighting in it, we really recommend the use of dimmers because you can create such nice effects with those without needing to get into all of the different colors that you'll see in other tiki styles. But this is where you can just look for some really cool pendant lighting, tabletops, hidden up lighting, which is always wonderful. And we just love up lighting wherever we can use it. But the result should be as much natural light during the day, as much warm lighting as possible at night, but just subtle. You don't want anything super bright. And you want it coming from a minimal number of fixtures. So I think that pretty much wraps up everything for Tiki in the authentic Polynesian style. From there, we can move on to a second design style, which is the mid-century American or retro Tiki, as it's now known. And this is a Tiki style that most people know. It's what was hugely popular in the 1950s and 60s. It's what we've written about and talked about in some other episodes, where we went through the whole history and its timeline. And in there is where we went into a lot of detail about the elements that make it up. We've talked about the design details, and we provided some links to some really great blog posts that we have, which really describe just those elements and colors and pieces. So I have to say, at the risk of repeating ourselves too much, I will not go into all of that again here, but I will include the links to those blog posts in the show notes for today's episode as well, in case you've missed those episodes. But we do highly recommend you go back and either read the blog posts or listen to our earlier episodes, because it is important to know where Tiki came from, how it started, what the original color schemes were. If this is something that really appeals to you and you want to go mid-century retro, this is where you're going to get into some of the retro colors, which are like orange, yellows, turquoise, there's greens and greenish yellows, there's different pinks, there's bluish purples. But it's got its own unique color palette, really, when you look through some of the imagery. But what's interesting about this particular style of Tiki is then you've got all these heavy uses of color either on the walls or in decor pieces, but now you're also bringing it in the lighting as well. In your lighting is where you're going to have very little normal natural light. This is where you've got your red bulbs and blue bulbs and every other kind of bulb you can imagine in terms of color. These lighting fixtures, they're in throughout the ceilings, they're on walls, they're on tabletops. You've got them layered in with wall decor as backlighting and uplighting behind accents. It's such a fun style to use because this is where you can really let your creativity shine. You can use as little or as much as you want of these different lighting fixtures and decor accent pieces. But it's just important to know, depending on the colors and the decor choices that you use, along with the placement of plants, either real or fake. In Tiki, you've got to have plants. You create the varying amounts to create your own tropical awesomeness. That's what's so nice about this. You use as little or as much as you want. Colored lighting is really cool too when you think about how it shines down on bar tops, on tabletops, in seating areas. If you can imagine being in your little Tiki space and you've got just these really cool shades of blue or green and lighting that are shining down on the little area where you're at, how it really creates just this amazing atmosphere. It just creates such cool moods when you get into the colored lighting in Tiki spaces. We just love it. We think you can get so creative with it, and the options are just endless. And another thing you can do with lighting too in Tiki spaces is, you know how crowded some Tiki spaces can look? If you've ever been to a Tiki restaurant or a bar, you know how they're just like really crowded and packed full of all kinds of different knick-knacky things and bottles and this and that. One thing you can do if you want that crowded look, but you also want to show off something really cool, like a great mug collection. You've got some great Tiki mugs, or you've got some really great art, or maybe a cool wall mask or something like this. Just arrange things in a way so that the focus is on the piece that you want spotlighted. You can have all of your other lights going, but then you can install a spotlight or something maybe a series of lights, a number of smaller ones, or maybe some little uplights on a series of shelves or something that are in a regular natural warm light color, or just something that's definitely contrasting differently from the colored light so that you can show off a really cool collection of things or some great artwork. So just know that you can do that. If you're concerned about things looking too crowded, but you have some really cool pieces you want to show, you can totally play with things as you need to create those little vignettes, as they're called, or little display areas without them getting crowded out. And the cool thing with Tiki is that if there's something that you don't like, you can just redo it any way you want. Like I said, there's no rules. So Tiki is wonderful for that. One thing we want to mention too is, since a lot of tiki styles are used in bar areas or somewhere where there is a TV, maybe in a family room or something like that, mounted TVs, obviously, they're great for watching movies, sporting events, even having a cool screensaver going if you're having a party or whatever. But there are some very ingenious ways to hide TVs when you're not watching them. And we think, in our humble cerulean Bay opinion, that a TV that's not on is absolutely ugly. there's there's nothing that detracts more from an awesome tiki space than a big empty black rectangle, plain and simple. So big empty black rectangles are a no-no if you are really trying to create an uninterrupted tiki style and theme. But what you can do is, there was something that we came across, and I actually have an image of it in this one blog post, which again, the link will be in the show notes. You can go ahead and measure a piece of plywood that is slightly larger than the rectangle size of the TV, and then measure and cut out 2 or 3 large circles, depending on how big it is, towards the middle of the piece of wood, leaving some space between them so that these can act as portholes. So think porthole in a ship that you can see out of, and these will let you see the TV screen. Then you cover the wood just with some woven palm leaf sheets. You can buy that kind of thing on a roll, where it's like a woven thatch look, or even some thatched bamboo leaves. You spread that out across the whole plywood and either staple it or somehow affix it to the plywood so that that part can't be seen, your staples or whatever it is you're using. And you cut out the circles. So cut out the circles in the wood, and then you're going to be cutting out the circles in whatever covering you're using so that you can see through it. And then just get some pieces of large cane bamboo or some really cool weathered wood or something and frame the whole thing. Just put a whole frame around this. Then what you want to do is, you can fasten this plywood across the front of the TV. This is where you're going to have to get a little ingenious. And depending on your own personal scenario that you have, obviously you don't want to damage your TV. But if there's a way that you can affix this to the TV so that it's removable, or if you've got the TV mounted and you can hang this piece of plywood right in front of it. There was one example where we had seen the homeowner had put the TV underneath a shelf, and at the front of the shelf, they installed some hinges. And then the plywood hung from those hinges so they could literally swing this thing open when they wanted full view of the TV. But the cool part is when you're not watching TV, you can put a screensaver on there, have this down in front of it with this really cool framed bamboo look, and you look like you have 2 portholes looking out into the ocean. If you've got some kind of underwater scenery going there, I think regarding portholes, it would probably be best to have an underwater scene or some kind of something out on the open water that's of visual interest. But again, just a quick tip that there are ways to hide the TV screen so you don't have the big void black rectangle. But whatever you do, keep it easily removable. You don't want to damage your TV, obviously. And you do want to be able to remove it if there's ever a time when you're going to be watching movies or, watching sports or whatever it is you like to watch. You definitely want it to be accessible. One other note about this kind of style of tiki, the retro tiki, is that there's a lot of smaller pieces available as well. Wherever you find big tiki statues and masks, there's going to be little tiki statues and masks as well, and other different little pieces. These are great for doing bathrooms. I think bathrooms are probably one of the most overlooked areas in a home. Or if you are fortunate to have a tiki bar that has its own bathroom, just go full tilt in there. That's where you can cover the walls as well in this palm thatch or bamboo thatch. And you can put cane bamboo framing and then just hang some really cool wooden pieces in there. You could even get like a captain's wheel with a mirror in it. So you've got a little mirror above the sink, and then put in some great fake plants in there, unless you've got a lot of natural light and you can have some real plants. Some colored lighting would look really cool. But yeah, don't forget about your bathroom. Those are some great little spaces where you can have a lot of fun to work with, just using smaller pieces of things. So I think from there, what we're going to do is move on to our next topic, which is jungle rainforests. And what I will say about jungle rainforests and the uh, decor styles that we have following this, these are probably going to be geared more towards actual tiki bars, indoors or outdoors, and less towards primary living spaces like living rooms or even bedrooms, because these design styles and themes, they are more intense, they are more decor heavy. There's a lot to them in terms of parts and pieces, and we think these are probably going to be too much for most people to use other than inside of a tiki bar or if you're building one outside. But that's not to say that you cannot use these in your indoor spaces if you want to. As we've said a million times, it's your space. The beauty of tiki is in the eye of the beholder. So use it indoors as heavily as you want, outdoors as heavily as you want. And that's what we are all about, is creating your own tropical escape at home. So just do whatever works for you. So getting into our jungle rainforests here. Let's see. This is where you have to really imagine how you yourself would feel in some really cool tropical jungle. Well, I won't say cool because they're usually hot and humid, but I think you know what I mean here. Where if you're out on a jungle safari or it's just some tropical rainforest somewhere, there's just something really, really cool about being in the deep greenery of the tropics. There's something about being immersed in that dense lushness of plants and trees, and it's got that real relaxing yet invigorating vibe at the same time. So I've always thought the idea of jungle rainforests was really cool, assuming that they're safe and there's no crazy wild animals out there that are a threat. But I think you get the point. Jungle rainforests full of plants. When you're using them in your space, they can be as real as you want or as fake as you want in terms of faux plants. But jungle greenery is the foundational part of the look. So if you find that you just love plants and can't get enough of jungles, that can be your primary focal point. It can be your foundational thing. And then within all of that is where you're installing your artwork, your decor pieces, your lighting, any furnishings, things like a tiki bar where you're physically storing, your bottles of booze and all of the barware, or bookcases, or creating seating areas. It can all be within these jungle rainforest spaces. It works best, I think, with jungle greenery is when you keep most of it to the ceilings and to the walls, because when people do go full tilt with this, they forget that using a lot of real and fake plants instantly does shrink a space. These are things that take up a lot of volume when it comes to airspace, physical space. So you want to keep your floor spaces open. You want to keep those accessible. Tiki spaces can be very crowded, but the last thing you want is that for either you or your guests to have to start pushing things out of the way. You just want people to get around easy. You don't want anyone knocking anything over. You certainly don't want anyone tripping over anything, because tiki spaces do tend to be on the darker side, especially when you use a lot of plants. For a bit of inspiration, if you should be lucky enough to have a rainforest cafe located where you live, we have two here in the Houston area. There is one out in Katy and there's another down on Galveston Island. But Rainforest Cafe, look them up online if you don't have one in town. They usually have a gallery of images, and it's a big family-friendly restaurant. They're big, they're noisy, the kids love them, but they're packed full of that tropical jungle rainforest feel. They have the sound system in there, which pipes in the sound of rain and the thunder. They even have all of these animated animals that start to come to life uh, at various times, or if it's someone's birthday and then they come out with the volcano dessert that has all the sparklers and little fireworks things in it. They're actually kind of fun. But yeah, get online and check out the Rainforest Cafe to kind of see that in a live setting where you're going to have images where there's just a lot of people in it. If you were to create a space at home, it would give you an idea in terms of, when you're entertaining or you throw a party, just what does it look like when you've got a room full of this stuff already, and now you're going to put a bunch of people in there too. I thought that they had pretty cool images. So yeah, look them up. But with this design style, as I mentioned, the key element is plants. And this is where you're going to look for different shades of green, different shapes of their leaves. Some of them will be in the shape of trees and bushes. Others are going to be in vines that you can hang from ceilings and get as creative as you want with wiring and trellising to string those along, have them creep down along your wall spaces and into shelving, and really just get as creative as you want. And again, interspersed with all of this is where you're going to have warm and cool colored lighting hidden among all of the plants and things. And the cool thing with using plants is it's very easy to hide light fixtures too, because in most tiki styles, that is kind of the goal, is you want the lighting to be seen, but you don't necessarily want all of your fixtures to be visible. So lighting is important because, again, jungles and rainforests, they don't receive a lot of natural light in the real world. And so your space is going to be on the darker side if this is something that you really are trying to give that authentic yet magical feeling to. You want to be deep in the jungle somewhere. Strategic lighting is going to be important. Just remember, for real plants, obviously these are going to be potted. It's very easy to hang potted plants. You can strategically hide those behind other plants as well, but just carefully space them out and make sure that everything is balanced in volume so that you don't end up with a ton of plant life over here, and then over here it's kind of looking sparse, because sometimes just trying to fill in that sparse place means that you've got too much overall. So as you're placing things and building out your tropical greenery, just keep looking around you. And if you think you've got enough in one spot, start working on another corner and keep going around and around, filling in spots as you're going until you end up with that complete look. So very, very important to think about what you're doing in terms of balance, because it's a lot of work. When you're creating any kind of a tiki look or style, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of installing after a whole lot of planning. It's buying a whole lot. So you want to make sure that what you're planning is really what you want to do, because you just don't want to end up buying a bunch of pieces that you're not going to use or you end up having to return. I mean, that can be such a pain. Uh, I do want to make a quick note about lighting and safety, because if you haven't already noticed in what we've been talking about so far, there's a lot of lights, and a lot of lights means a lot of plugs. So that's really what this is a lot of stuff needs to be plugged in. And you just really want to keep safety in mind with this, because tiki spaces require a lot of lighting. Sometimes you can get away with battery operated things or solar powered pieces if you have the opportunity to let them charge outside and then bring them in. But if you're going to be using a lot of straight electric pieces, just know that you're going to be having a lot of lighting placed in areas where you normally wouldn't have them. People use all kinds of lighting across ceilings, as I mentioned, to backlight things. If you've got pieces on the wall, or you've got a really cool bar, you've got shelving up there with all of your bottles and things, and you want lighting from behind, or inside shelving and display cases, if you have any of those. Little tiny lights can be tucked away in any endless number of places and corners. Where are you going to plug all of this in? That's my whole point here. is you want to be very careful not to overload outlets and power strips. I think actually, if you're starting a Tiki space from scratch, it's almost easier because you can plan out your whole finished product on paper and in your head and make sure, you've got a pretty solid picture there, and then mentally start really installing your lights. What do you want to see where? This is going to start determining how many outlets you're going to need. If you're working with an existing space already, or you've already got a fully decorated room or bar area that you're now just going to add Tiki to and just add more to it, consider what's already plugged in. Maybe all of your outlets are already being used. So this is where it's important to really plan what you're going to need, whether you're starting from scratch or not, and consider having additional outlets installed. If you're a licensed electrician and you know how to do it, how cool is that for you? You can just do that yourself. For most people, I would recommend having the pros come out and do that. Too many outlets is better than not enough. Some people will even go so far as having a few extra breakers added to their main circuit panel outside. I know a few people that have even upgraded the entire panel because the house was just older anyway. So they just went and upgraded the entire panel, had a bunch of extra circuits put in for the use of Tiki. I think in general, you're not looking at anything that's really a heavy load electricity wise. It's just plugging in a lot of stuff, a lot of lights, maybe a few special effects. But, the last thing you want is a fire. You just don't want a fire. After going through all of this work, you really need to be very, very careful, especially if you're in an older home that has older wiring. So, yeah, that's my quick note on your electricity needs. You're going to factor in a sound system. We always say having some really cool music being available, in addition to that flat screen TV, if you're going to be using that too. But having the sound of some rain and thunder mixed in, again, another plug, another outlet. So consider everything. And then it's worth it to spend the money to be a little safe and just have those extra outlets and switches and things installed. Just remember, you can have outlets installed in your ceiling. You can have them pretty much wherever an electrician says you can, as long as everything is to code. But you can place them in places where you normally wouldn't otherwise put them to then be able to plug things in and create a very, very cool Tiki space. So I think with that, we are pretty much at time for the day. I'm just going to say we've got another episode coming up with the remainder of our decor styles. We'll get in a bit of the headhunters and cannibals in there. We're going to get into the pirate look. There's quite a bit of detail that goes into the pirate look. That's where we get into the world of nautical. Some people love it, some people don't love it, but it is definitely worth covering because most tiki bars do have elements of nautical in there, whether some people know it or not. And then that's where we're going to get into the beachcomber look to the surfer look, kind of that Jimmy Buffett Key West look, which also works very, very well in tiki. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and wish you an awesome week and one that is filled with tropical inspiration. Just take some time and sit back and relax and imagine your tropical happy space. Imagine what your space should look like for you, and then just start planning it out on paper. Start small and then grow it from there. Come back to our show here, Tropical Escapes at Home. Visit us at ceruleanbay.com. And you can check us out on Patreon as well. We've got our different membership tiers there as well. And we have our YouTube channel coming. As soon as this eye heals up, I'll get on there. But until then, just have an awesome week and take care. We will catch you next time. Thanks.